All right, that part's done. It's just going to be a picture of me up, Sherwin, so we'll just deal with it. And a picture of David.
Yeah,
so
it's fine.
All right, I'm going to disappear for about 30 seconds as we, or maybe 90 seconds or so as I start the show, and then we'll be right back with you. Y'all ready to roll? David?
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Sherwin?
we're ready.
All right, here we go. We are recording now. Welcome, y'all! That's right. This is the Pregame Engineer Tailgate Mayor Racing Podcast, episode number 243. It's Monday, May 11th, 2020. I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace. I'm in the PTM Podcast studio all alone once again in quarantine week number 9. And here momentarily, we'll bring on the rest of the guests. Before we do that, you know what? We're gonna do the read a little bit later because we got started a little later tonight. We're gonna go ahead and bring everybody on so that we can get started here. And first person to bring on, my partner in crime here, co-host of the PTM Podcast, Andrew Sherwin. What's up, dude?
Hey, man. Well, you know what? We got a late start here, but that's okay. It happens.
Technical difficulties abound tonight. I don't know what the deal is, but who knows? But we're going to get straight into it and talking to our very special guest here. We want to welcome to the show. He's a reporter for The Athletic covering Major League Baseball and the Braves on Twitter at DOBryanATL. It's David O'Brien. David, what's up?
What's going on, fellas? How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks a lot for joining and hanging out with us amidst all the technical difficulties. Like I said, 243 episodes of doing this, and maybe it's a badge of honor. You get to be the one where something happens and it completely messed up here and got us started late. So appreciate you being here.
David might be the first one that doesn't want to come back.
Yeah, right.
Makes me appreciate having a producer at our podcast.
Yeah, I hear you. So, David, we get this thing started the same way every time. What are you drinking on tonight?
I'm drinking coffee right now, about my sixth or seventh cup.
Staying awake, getting it ready, roll. Sherwin, what you got?
Yeah.
Bourbon and diet tonic.
My man, well done. And the old
bourbon and diet tonic. It's a good thing you got diet tonic there, man.
Well,
balance out the good with the
less hangover, right? Less sugar.
Less sugar. Is that the idea? I dig it.
I don't know.
So, David, we'll get straight into baseball talk because I know we've taken up a lot of the time already with technical difficulties, but let's start with the latest plans to go back. So Major League Baseball talking about an 82-game season. Not sure exactly where all they're being played, who's going to be in it, and what is it, 14-team playoff? Maybe you can give me the rundown so far, the latest.
Oh, man. Today's proposal that they're going to present to the union tomorrow. I haven't even read Ken's latest story. Ken's our national guy. Ken breaks all the good stuff on where we are with this. Ken and Evan Drylock, we have two guys doing national guy. I'm Braves guy, so when they get the national details down, that's when I start looking ahead to what we might be doing. There's been so many different things out there, but there's still 2 months to go, so anything can happen between now and then. But I know they want to play the games and as many home ballparks as they can, and the Braves would be one of those. So, and since it'd be shortened to a half season, they're going to expand the playoffs a little bit and get more teams in there. Should be an exciting tournament if they can keep everybody in it, keep everybody healthy, and get through this thing. I mean, it's going to be a season with a huge asterisk by it, regardless. So. Have some fun with it. Try some things that us old school guys normally would probably frown upon. I don't really mind if they give everything a try this year.
It's a great time. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Rusty.
Okay.
I was going to say that's a great point. That's one of the big things we've been talking about NASCAR, David, is that this is the time where you're going to be given leeway to experiment with things because it's going to have to be different in some shape, way, form, or fashion. and we're hearing things about DH universally. We're hearing things like 50-man active rosters with perhaps 32 guys in the dugout in case they have to deal with COVID and whatever injuries it might be associated with playing as many doubleheaders as they're going to play, and 6 starting pitchers and all that. So I don't know. I listened to all.
The Braves are well suited. The Braves are well suited for the type of compressed season that they're talking about doing, because they have more depth this year than they've had in quite a while, and they got the best bullpen they've had in more than a decade, probably. Maybe the deepest bullpen they've had since going back to like '02. I mean, it's a bullpen that you could handle, for instance, 2 7-inning doubleheader games. You could set aside 3 all-star closers or former all-stars and set up guys and have 3 still to go in the second game. That's how many you've got. So, and 6 starters, they've got that too. They've got 2 guys competing for that 5th spot. Both pitched really well down at spring training. With Cole Hamels hurt, they were both going to be in the opening day rotation. Well, now Cole Hamels probably won't miss much of the season at all. I mean, because he's had time to heal from his shoulder strain. So that depth there is really going to help them. And you also had Kyle Wright pitch really well down there too, in addition to the guys fighting for that 5th spot, which were with King Felix Hernandez and Sean Newcomb.
Well, with that depth, do you think maybe the Braves would consider, and they're probably considering everything at this point, because we're all just shaking up that Yahtzee jar full of die and trying to figure out what's going to happen with professional sports. But is Cole Hamels a guy that, maybe a guy that you would, come in the 4th inning and maybe pitch 3 innings to bridge a gap or something of that respect?
No, they wouldn't have him. They wouldn't have him do that. They didn't sign him to a $18 million free agent contract to be a middle innings reliever, and he's not going to want to do that either, because he's going to try to get one more contract before he retires. So I can't see that. I mean, I shouldn't say no, absolutely, but no, I can't see that. That'd be more likely to be the guy you signed for a $1 million minor league deal, Felix Hernandez. But like I said, they've got room for six starters if they're going to be playing doubleheader games and fewer off days and that kind of thing. You're gonna need 6 starters anyway, at least.
So, and that makes perfect sense. Who's the guy? So if we do go to this universal DH, which it sounds like we're pretty much going to have to, because the East is going to play the East on both sides of the bracket. Who's the guy that you would want to see spend the most time in that DH role?
Well, again, they're well suited for that, better than they have been in some time, because you had 2 guys competing for the third base job in Johan Camargo and Austin Riley, and they were probably the 2 most impressive position guys down at spring training before they shut it down. So I could conceivably see them using Camargo at third and have Austin Riley be the DH. Unless they decide Austin was actually playing better third than Camargo, but Austin is more of that prototypical DH type guy with the power that he's got. And you could have Austin at third and rotate Camargo around to several positions, like was the original plan last year. And then you've got 5 outfielders, and one of those guys could be a DH. You got extra outfielders now with Markakis and Duvall, and Ender Inciarte, because you've only got 2 spots that are really kind of locked in with Ozuna and, of course, Acuna. Now, you could use Ozuna at the DH too, because he really didn't, he's not much of a defensive player at this point. But so there's some options there, and they're well suited, like I said, for that, for a DH and a 6th starter as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think this type of schedule, at least the way they're trying to map it out right now, is tailor-made for the Braves, having Camargo, who could play basically every infield position and a couple of outfield positions, and you have Culberson, who can do everything and probably call balls and strikes. So they do have options that maybe some other teams don't.
Yeah, for instance, Charlie wasn't even assured of a spot. He signed a minor league deal, but with the expanded, when you go past 26 men, he will have a spot, so that'd be good. And he'd give that bat off the bench or play any of the outfield positions, couple of the infield positions, or the corner outfield positions, I should say, at this point.
So one of the things we know, Rusty already mentioned the fact that basically half the teams are going to make whatever becomes of the playoffs. What does that first week of playoffs look like? Are those going to be one game play-in games like we've seen with this extra wild card the last 4 or 5
I do not
years?
know. I don't know if that details of any of that have come out yet. So I think that's going to have to be something that they hash out. But I would think they'd want at least to do a best of 3. But again, I haven't seen the latest reports on that. Sorry, I should have done that, but I had something going on here with a pet. So, there's been so many things discussed already that I didn't get in the last hour. I didn't check on Evans and
it may not even exist yet anyway. So
I don't know that. I mean, that's all got to be discussed along with pay and everything. I mean, there's still huge obstacles they have to get through, especially pay. The players don't want to take further cuts, and owners want them to because there's not going to be any fans in the stands, and the revenues are going to be decreased.
Yeah, well, when you're selling, thousands of $7 beers at every game, and you're not going to be able to do that.
Parking revenues, and it's a lot. It adds up in a hurry.
Yeah.
$7. That's the low end of the beers at Truist Park.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's a Bud Light. That's not a Sweetwater or a Terrapin.
Yeah, that's something I hadn't thought about much, Sherwin. I mean, same thing with NASCAR. I mean, we're getting started this weekend, and I mean, none of the concessions are open, none of the anything like that. So the tracks are. I don't know how much the tracks are eaten in order to even be open, and I'm wondering, the same thing with the stadiums. If stadiums aren't open to people for a while, how much are they either eating or what? And we'll talk about all that on the NASCAR side here in a bit. But, one thing, David, I wanted to ask you about Major League Baseball. We were talking earlier about this is the season to try some stuff at this point. And one of the things that NASCAR is, I think it's a great trial run for something that fans have been asking for and people have been speculating is midweek races. It's always Sunday races in NASCAR. And so now they're doing one this coming, or not 2 days from now, but a week from Wednesday. What other types of things in the baseball world have you heard that people might be, looking at that you might think, this is a good trial run for that sort of idea? Anything like that?
Well, I mean, they've discussed, things like the automatic strike zone, which I would hate, but, they're talking about how with, the way that you wouldn't have to have the umpire breathing over the catcher's shoulder, that would make some sense in that regard. Miking up players, which, I don't like the concept of it in a regular season game, but it really was great when they did it. Like Freddie Freeman, for instance, was mic'd up for a spring training game, and it was just highly entertaining. So I could see some guys being mic'd, have one or two guys mic'd for entire games. I mean, because it's going to be a made-for-TV event anyway with nobody in the stands.
Right.
So might as well make it as good a TV show as you can. I think the ratings are going to be huge with no other sports going on.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right about that. And I think that's one of the things that NASCAR took a tremendous advantage of, the how realistic the virtual racing thing is, and miking up drivers and all these Twitch streams and stuff. And to your point, the major part of what your point is, this is going to be a television show.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be all about how good is this TV product going to be, and what can we learn from this process that maybe makes baseball TV better in the future? Because one of the big knocks on baseball has been, this game's kind of slow and kind of boring. It's really fun being at the ballpark, getting me a hot dog and drinking way too many beers and all that stuff. And of course, spending a lot of money that the owners love. But I wonder what we're going to learn from a broadcast perspective, like miking players that we know aren't going to say the F word on a public broadcast. Maybe they have the 6-second dump button and they can figure out how to work that out. But, are they going to learn something that will stick forever because it becomes a better product in that respect? It almost becomes a radio product where you're painting a picture. Even though we're looking at a picture, they're having to paint a picture that isn't empty seats. It's what's happening on the diamond.
Yeah. And then another thing is the 7-inning games for a doubleheader, which they've never done in the major league level, really. I think it makes perfect sense. They do it in the minor leagues, do it in college ball, and if it would facilitate some future doubleheaders, I'd be all for it. Because games have gotten so long these days that having back-to-back 9-inning games that's a tough ask to ask people to expect people to be in there for 8-9 hours watching baseball. But if you do 7-inning games, I think it adds a lot to it. It adds a little bit of urgency in the game, and you might be able to get people, especially if you only have 30 minutes between the games. If you do a traditional doubleheader, you might get a lot more people willing to sit through 5-6 hours of baseball, and if it's good.
Yeah. And another thing is, I feel like what we've seen over the last, call it a decade, is that a lot of these double headers have, when they had to happen because of rain or schedule constraints, they've been, noon starts, split double headers.
Because they don't want to lose. They don't want to lose a date. The umpires don't want. The owners don't want to lose a gate, which they do if they have a traditional doubleheader.
Right, because you only have to buy the one ticket.
Right. Clear the seats, bring in a whole new crowd of people, give out the rain check from the rain out game, for one game, and yeah.
So that pretty much means that if they're going to do that on the regular in order to shrink this, even if it's only half a season, they're going to have to shrink it as best they can. It means most teams are, like we already discussed, going to carry 6 starting pitchers. They're also going to have to carry 3 catchers. So who's the third guy that the Braves are going to put behind the plate?
Well, it would be Alex Jackson right now, but they could always make a move if they want to add another veteran for that, because they got 2 really good catching prospects coming up. Shea is probably going to be the guy for number 1 pick last year. He's going to be really good. And the little brother of the Cubs catcher, I don't know if Shea Langoliers is the Baylor guy, the first-round draft pick last year.
Yeah, Langoliers is the one I've heard of.
He's outstanding, man. Defensively, he could win a Gold Glove, probably close to it already. He's that good.
Well, the Braves need a guy that can throw somebody out of second base. We don't do a lot of that.
He's got a cannon. He's going to shut down some running games, which they haven't had in quite a while. He's got an arm like Betancourt had, only Betancourt didn't have the head to put it all together and the desire to fully realize his talent, and this kid does. So, and his bat's really coming. It came a long way since last year. He started out in rookie ball using a wood bat on a regular basis for the first time, and by the end of the year, he was really hitting. So in A ball, so he might only be a year and a half away. It's they've got a couple of guys coming, but in the interim, Alex Jackson's got some major league experience now. He's not a guy you want to use out there much, but they could always go out and get somebody as well. They've done that in the past, signed a veteran guy late.
Yeah.
So the other day, with obviously nothing else on TV as far as sports goes, I think it was Sports South or Fox Sports. I can't remember who was playing it, but they were playing Game 6. They played the entire World Series of in '95, and when it got to Game 6, I watched the whole thing. My claim to fame or history or whatever, I had the privilege of actually attending that game, and I was amazed on the TV side. I'm not sure I've actually watched the entirety of that game on TV before. I've watched the end, and I've watched David Justice home run and stuff. But yeah. I was surprised. We were talking earlier about the show and the TV event that it is, and there were several times throughout the whole broadcast where they would go a half inning without showing anything on TV but just what was going on. There wasn't like a ticker showing, how many balls and strikes.
Right.
There wasn't anything showing you, the pitch speed. There was nothing showing you how many, who was even winning the game, how many hits there were, nothing. Who was on base, nothing like that. It was just what was on TV. And I was intrigued in both directions in terms of, is this a good thing in that I'm just watching baseball at this point? I'm not augmented and see all this other stuff. I'm just seeing baseball and living it as I might at the stadium. And on the flip side, it's like, well, I'm a stats nerd. I'm a nerd to start with, which means, I love numbers and all that stuff. So I was kind of torn on that. Curious, David, what your thoughts are there.
Well, the first thing, and by the way, Contreras is the other catcher that they have, the other catching prospect, just so If people were wondering, it's the Cubs catcher's little brother. So, and he's really good defensively as well. Getting back to your question, that it really stands out when the MLB shows these old games because we've gotten so accustomed to, and we forget it wasn't that long ago when the score and the count and the position of the runners on base. We forget it's a relatively recent thing. Even the score, I mean, that came along a lot sooner than the other stuff.
Sure.
But in the last 10 years, the count and the position of the runners on base and even defensive shifts are showing up on some people's broadcasts. But I like not having such a busy screen, but I do think at a minimum, I want to have the score and the outs. I want that up there. I want to be able to glance at the TV and know what the score is and what inning it is. But you had to wait until they deemed it time to flash it up there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird. You get used to that. Take for granted that you could just glance at the screen at any time if you're not, if you're doing something, if you're reading something or the newspaper or something while the game's on, you need to just be able to glance up at the screen and know exactly where they are in a game. And so you kind of get – but with that, you had to be paying attention, and you couldn't really take your eye off the screen if you wanted to know for sure.
Right. Yeah. It was an interesting and almost jarring thing when you look away for 2 seconds and you come back and you go, wait, what happened to the last guy? Is he out? Is he on base? Did he hit a home run? Right. I have no idea. One other thing you mentioned, and I kind of want to prod the bull here a little bit, was about I think it was the automatic strike zone piece. And I'm really curious to hear I know you'll have a well thought out dissenting opinion on that. I have no opinion myself, and I actually for a while there used to be a baseball umpire in little leagues and then up through into high school stuff. But I'm curious about what your thoughts are there. You had mentioned before you're against it, but what the deep diving into that.
Well, the strike zone is too tight. It is as it's being called now because umpires get docked for missing calls on balls that are off the plate. If they call a strike on a ball that's an inch off the plate, they get docked points. They get when they get reviewed. Yeah. So the result is everybody's following the exact strike zone as it is widthwise. And then you're not getting the strike zone up and down vertical up to the armpits is where it is, but nobody calls it up there. No. Nobody calls a strike up there. But point is, it was better when you had good umpires who had their own strike zone. It varied from guy to guy by a little bit, but pitchers knew because the guy was consistent with it. So as long as the guy's consistent with it, I don't know any pitchers that really mind a guy having, given you an inch or two off the plate or squeezing you a little bit, as long as he's consistent with it, throughout the game on both sides. But the way it is now, it's so tight that it makes games last a lot longer for one thing, but also, you see a lot more offensive guys because guys they're not getting any calls right off the plate. It really, a guy like Tom Glavine and Greg Maddux, they would utilize that strike zone because they could really they could hit a dime, and umpires rewarded them for it hitting that spot, and they would slowly work out a little further, and the catcher would set up just off the plate. Well, that's kind of eliminated right now with umpires being downgraded for making calls that are even an inch off the plate. So you're going to get that times 10 if it's an automatic zone, and you really it's not going to reward pitch framing at all, which is, in the last 10 years, pitch framing has become such a valued skill for catchers. But I can't see where pitch framing would work at all in an automatic strike zone. If they have overhead cameras and all that, and angles that show where the ball is crossing the plate. So, I think there's something to having this thing, to that human element, and a guy being able to frame a pitch, and a guy being able to work the strike zone, and just the whole. I just think it adds a whole lot of makes the game of chess more interesting than just everything automated. I'm against replay because of it's the way it's utilized. I'm for the use of it in a very limited basis, but some of the things I would use it for, they don't even use it for. Like calls, down the foul lines and things like that, and what they do utilize it for, which I think completely goes against the spirit of the rule is the place, for instance, at second base when a fielder keeps the tag on the runner after he slides across the bag or tries to hang on to the bag, or just his inertia takes the natural. It's human, just physics that you're usually going to break contact with the bag just for a nanosecond, just a millimeter, an eighth of an inch maybe. When you can't even see it with the naked eye, but they slow it down on replay, and the guy's kept his glove, is trained to keep his glove on the guy's foot now because he's just trying to reach back and grab the bag. And I just don't understand what that accomplishes. What does that have to do with baseball? The game was played the way it was for 150 years, and all of a sudden a guy can't go sliding in hard because he's worried about sliding past the bag and his foot breaking contact with the bag for a split second, and the guy having the tag on his leg. So what do? You reduce base stealing, because guys have to be so damn careful. I mean, they can't. Just little shit like that. I just don't understand why that it's used. And then and the play at the plate obviously has just been a cluster bleep with the whole with nobody understands quite what they can do as far as blocking the plate. Can they be there if the throw carries them in front of the runner? Do they have to give the sure? You got. I mean, were they dangerous? Yeah, but how many guys actually got hurt? Crippling type of injuries compared to what you see 300 times in a football game, Sure. And I just think that was aggressive base running. Those plays at the plate are memorable, man. You always remember some of those plays, even in an All-Star game with Pete Rose. But the Braves had a couple of those in their run, plays at the plate, collisions. Darren Dalton, I remember getting run over one time at the plate. But I just think that's a good aggressive baseball, and so I don't like that rule. But that's not replay. I just don't like that rule. So who knows? I'm a dinosaur with that stuff, though. But
well, I remember Javi Lopez getting train wrecked a couple times too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would be pretty well aligned with David on this, despite the fact that it was our guy that had his career ruined by a play at the plate that was like that. Greg Olson had basically a career-ending ankle break as a result. But I remember, Lonnie Smith running somebody over, and that could have been Darren Dalton. I can't remember.
That was the LCS against the Pirates. The others against the Pirates.
Oh, because it was probably Pete Cavalier or whatever. Whatever his name is.
Yeah.
And that was. I mean, he hit him like a linebacker would hit somebody.
He did.
but he.
It was great.
Pete held on to the ball, so he was out.
Well, nine times out of 10, everybody's okay. They're just a little shaken up, but it was a skill hanging onto the ball. But catchers knew you stay out of you do the sweep tag, or you get ready to get jacked. I mean, you can't block the plate. You got to give the runner. But that took care of itself. It didn't need to be a rule. And what happens with the rule is, I mean, it's fine in principle, but then guys end up using that. Say if it's a high-priced catcher or somebody the umpire likes, and a guy ends up, he's just trying to get to the plate, and the catcher doesn't give him room at all, and you got to be able to get to the plate. So, but if you hit him, you're called. It's just a mess. It's messed up.
It is really weird because because of the type of play that it ultimately becomes. Because when we see those type plays happen in the other portions of the base paths, it's very obvious when an umpire will call, obstruction of the runner, or the runner running way out of bounds to get around a tag. Which I actually personally, I don't care. You want to run out to center field and then run at third base, and if you're safe, you're safe. Like, I don't give a damn. But
and then but they use that, and then they don't apply that rule properly on the play at first base when a runner is just naturally kind of coming inside the line to get to first base. Like they had a big one in the postseason, and they call a guy out for going out of the baseline when he's doing nothing but running naturally from the plate. Because when you start, you kind of drift out a little bit, and he called him out because the throw throws could still have been made, but the guy hit him, and they called the runner out for being obstructing for being out of the baseline, but he wasn't. So that's not even that rule's messed up too. So
well, that one gets really weird because left-handers and right-handers take off at a different angle.
Right. Exactly.
So we'll get you out of here on this, Dave. There's one more question I wanted to ask. How many times do you think Altuve is going to get hit once we start playing baseball again?
I don't think players are going to forget that. The Astros are probably hoping that this whole COVID-19 shutdown has made people forget all about the Astros thing, because I'm sure they were pulling for the shutdown. They're probably the only team that was, but I don't think anybody's going to forget, because I've never heard such a unanimous voice against an action among other players, as there was against the Astros cheating. I mean, people were more vocal and outspoken about that than I've heard of them ever be about any action involving another team and other players. I mean, the players were almost universally condemning that during spring training. And so I don't think people are going to forget that. And I think him and Bregman and a couple other guys are going to they're going to take the brunt of that once the season gets going. You're going to see a lot of HBPs if they're not tossing people out of the games for doing it.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, is the extended roster going to allow teams to be a little bit more creative with that process?
Probably will. You're going to have more pitchers. You're going to have a couple more pitchers down there, so you can afford to have a guy get tossed.
Well, you were talking about the strike zone. I mentioned I was an umpire for a little while. One thing that I distinctly remember it was a high school tournament game, and it was the very first inning, and the coach that was on offense, he didn't complain at me that I called the strike. All he did was go, "Hey, hey, Blue, you gonna call that on this side?" And I said, "I call every strike." And he goes, "My man." We'll close you out on this one, David. Tony Gwynn, 60th birthday would have been Saturday. And wow. I grew up, me and Sherwin were born in the early 80s. I would say we both, quote unquote, grew up in the 90s and watching baseball and watching the Braves and, being so excited for the run that we had, in the early, mid, and into the late 90s. But I don't know that I realized at the time the greatness that Tony Gwynn was. And just reading back on some of the stats and stuff, throwing a couple of them out there, he averaged 22 strikeouts per season. And last year, there were 129 players that had 22 strikeouts by the end of April. Like a totally different, baseball game and everything else, like you said, with the tightening of the plate and everything. He batted.
He batted 396 one year, didn't he?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, he went well over 400. Well past the midpoint of the season. He was well over 400. But look at his numbers against Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz. He hardly ever struck out against any of them.
Right.
I mean, he only had like a couple of strikeouts.
That's one of Rusty's stats. He's got a cool one.
Hey, he batted 331
Hall of Fame pitchers.
Yeah,
331 against 18 Hall of Fame pitchers and 541 plate appearances. If you line up, 18 Hall of Fame pitchers. And give not me, because obviously I'm not even going to hit a ball, but give anybody 541 attempts. There's no way they're going to hit 331. It's insane. And my favorite stat of all of them is that he was with 20 years with the Padres, and if you take his 20 years and split them into two 10-year careers, okay, so you have 10 years to start and 10 years to end, then he is first and second in runs, hits, total bases, and doubles.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I love that stuff. But, like I said, I didn't realize at the time and didn't quite understand, I was watching the Braves and I was excited about all that, but just didn't understand the greatness that we were seeing. And so, hats off and beers are up for old Tony Gwynn.
And what's sad is that I don't know if there's even a place in the game today if he would be as celebrated as he was back then, because everybody, I don't know if he would have changed his approach, because there's so much pressure to hit some power in the game today. And he didn't hit much power at all. And neither did guys like Rod Carew. who always hit over 300, well into, mid 300s most of the time, was a hitting machine. But those guys didn't look to hit home runs. They looked to hit where the pitch was thrown, go the other way, lace it through the infield, get a hit. I mean, they're just looking for hits. They weren't looking for launch angles and home runs. And everybody's so obsessed with that now and get paid for it that I don't know. I don't know if Tony would have been the same type hitter that he was, and that would have been a shame. But you don't see. There's no guys in the game right now that are like that. Nobody.
Well, yeah, and look at the year that Chipper knew that he didn't have the power to go for 40 home runs, so he said, I'm going to put the ball in play every time I get at the plate. And he was batting 400 at the All-Star break and won the batting title. I think he hit 364. Yeah. And, it's just...
You're talking about his age 38 when he won the batting title?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. But he's still... he could still backspin a ball out on a swing that looked like it shouldn't go 300 feet. He could still hit a home run off anybody at any field because he just was that ability he had to backspin a ball. It was just insane. I mean, it was preternatural what he could do with a bat.
And Tony Gwynn, that was another one that I didn't write down, but I did see that there was something like a 6-year stretch where he had more home runs than he had swings and misses, meaning if he came up to the plate against you, he was more likely to hit a home run than he was to miss the ball.
Tony?
Are you kidding?
Yeah. And Tony, I think his biggest year was 17 home runs. Does that sound about right,
might
David?
Have been. I mean,
it sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, insane.
He never even hit 20, huh? I
don't think so. I think he was a 9 to 14 kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
There's just none of those guys anymore, I mean, he looked to go up there, get singles and doubles, get base hits, and if he connected it by accident once in a while, he could take you deep. Let's see. Yeah, he had 14 homers early in his career, age 26 in 1986. And then he did not hit double digits again until his age 34 season. Now, towards the end of his career, in the 90s, 97, 98, 99, he had, 3 straight years where 95 through 97, he had 17, 11, 12 homers. That's the only time he ever had back-to-back 97, 98, 99. That's the only years he ever had back-to-back homers. He never even had back-to-back years with double-digit homers, except for 97, 98, 99, where he had 17, 16, and 10 homers in those years.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Only had 2 other years where he even had double-digit homers.
Well, I think that's what's so impressive about what Albies is doing. Because you look at Tony Gwynn, and he was a pretty big man.
Tony did
well. His craft was hitting the baseball in play.
Mm-hmm.
But to see a guy that weighs 165 pounds, is 5'9", put 25 homers over the fence, it's like, okay, this is a different game now.
Yeah, and I've never seen anybody put together quite like Ozzie. Altuve's about his height. Altuve's a little thicker, though. Altuve's also really strong. But I've never seen anybody quite as wiry as in a baseball uniform as Ozzie. I mean, they do without a shirt. He is just ripped like a bodybuilder, man. There's no fat on that guy, man. He's strong as an ox. You shake his hand, you cannot believe how strong his grip is. Even when he weighed like 15 pounds less than he does now, he had this man's grip when he was like 18 years old in the minor leagues that he'd shake your hand at 18 years old. I remember meeting him at a spring training game where they brought him over from the minor league side. And Freddie Gonzalez was like, you got to go see it. That's Ozzie Albies over there. And he looked like a ball boy on the field. He was so small, smaller than he is now. And really young looking. And I shook his hand and I could not. Freddie said, shake his hand. What do you see his grip? I couldn't believe how strong his hands were. Wow. Even when he was 18 years old.
Wow. Well, David, we appreciate you so much for being on, and we want to let you get back to what you're doing. And
all right.
I appreciate you hanging through with all the technical difficulties and everything. It's been a blast talking baseball for a little bit. Sherwin, maybe we ought to start a baseball podcast at some point, but I don't think we can compete with the likes of David and everybody else on there. But it's fun to have the distraction every once in a while. So appreciate you being on, David.
Hey, my dad growing up, by the way, was a we grew up I grew up in North Carolina. My dad was a Richard Petty, huge Richard Petty fan.
Right on.
He actually had his car painted Petty blue.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
if you can give us 30 more seconds, did you ever get to experience any of the Ned Yost, Dale Earnhardt Sr. relationship, or was that way before?
No, just stories about it. But no, I never saw Dale come to a game or anything, but I heard stories about it. Yeah. Yeah, he loved NASCAR. Ned did. And Dale.
Yeah. And Dale loved the Braves, so that's cool.
Yeah.
And Bobby loved NASCAR, man. They had a NASCAR pool every weekend when Bobby was manager. Players and Bobby and the coaches would all have a NASCAR pool.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
That is awesome. I did not know that.
Every race when Bobby was managing, they had it just like they do football now. They did football too then, but the NASCAR was the number one thing with when Bobby was the manager. A lot of times they'd let Bobby win.
Well.
Oh, that's cool. Never knew that.
You got to let the captain run the ship every now and again.
He was a huge fan. He always had the race on and on Saturdays in spring training and during the season too. We'd go in there and talk to him before games. He'd have a race on. They went over to Daytona a few times during spring training. I know like Mike Hampton, I think, a couple of those guys, they charter like a helicopter and go over there after a game in spring training or workout.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, David, we appreciate you being on. Y'all be sure to follow at it was D O'Brien ATL. So
there you go.
Appreciate you hanging out, man.
And our podcast is 755 is real.
755.
And it's real fun. Eric O'Flaherty joins out of Seattle. You guys have a fantastic connection that we weren't able to find for a while tonight. But
we've had our glitches too, but ours, when they happen, we had a producer, like if a call gets dropped, we just kind of stop it and restart it. So but we don't do it live. So there you go.
Yeah.
Right on.
Well,
Thanks a lot,
Thank you
David.
very much.
All right, man.
All right. Take
Good
care.
luck.
Sherwin,
All right.
we still got plenty more to talk about right here. We've got
Right, which is why I got to make a drink.
have you one, buddy?
I am fresh out of drink.
It's all good. Dude, so first off, first period, we'll go down to the report card. North Wilkesboro, we had the Chase Rice, I can't even say his name, Chase Rice anthem, holding a beer with all the Jack Daniels in the background. That was glorious. I thought it was fantastic.
I hate that I missed that, but I'm willing to admit that I did.
And that's fine. So on YouTube,
because I can go back and watch it.
Yeah, on YouTube they have the whole thing, and so it's worth seeing that. And then skipping forward, they had the B-52 Stratofortress
that
flyover.
I did see, and my my buddy that I watched it with, whose dad is an Army vet, was very appreciative that they chose the Fortress for the flyover.
Yeah,
that's an Air Force Army crossover plane that those guys have a lot of reverence for.
And then J.J. Watt with the command, and he even said, all right, boys, I ain't going to half-ass this thing. And then he did not half-ass it whatsoever. He was sitting in his office with his wingback chair, and this thing, wraps around him, too, this leather wingback. And he just, driver, he went nuts. It was awesome. So good on him. We had Hamlin bookending the iRacing Pro Invitational wins by taking the last one, taking the first one at Daytona. The Ross Chastain spin during the cool-down lap was pretty funny. You even texted me about it, and I was distracted. But, yes, that was funny.
I laughed a bunch because this is what I love about Ross. Ross is like, look, man, I don't know how many times I got to tell you I'm blue collar.
Right.
But if you wreck me, you're going to find out how blue collar I am.
Yeah, no kidding. And then the one thing, and the reason I'm flying through these topics, because the one thing that I want to talk about is how cool a track is North Wilkesboro. I know this might be for some folks like me and you, maybe the first time we've seen a quote-unquote, this isn't a cup race, but cup drivers on, even if it's a virtual track, on this track, and seeing really all the pieces come together there, and there is no place like that we race at right now, with the short track, 4 lanes wide, and very circular, circle, feeling the flow, doing the bull dance, all that. But it's a constant turn the whole way around. It's just so different from anything else that we do, and I was intrigued by that.
Yeah, there's more length in the turns than there is straightaway. Mm-hmm. And I think actually I would wonder if whoever built Atlanta Motor Speedway, the original track, didn't take a lot of notes about what Wilkesboro looks like, because that was their whole thing is we want a half a mile of corner and we want a mile straightaway.
Right.
Wilkesboro's what? It's 3/8. It's like 0.62 miles. Is a little bit less than 3/8, obviously, if you know how to do all that math. But yeah, it was cool. And it's nice and flat, which means you're liable to have multiple grooves, just like we have at Loudon. And of course, it depends on the package they run. That matters quite a bit on how many lines they're going to have to run. But yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was interesting. It was, Ross made it more interesting at the end.
Yeah. I have fallen in love with that racetrack, and who knows? It's probably a pipe dream for NASCAR to return there necessarily, but I think it at least turn some heads. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if Bruton not even Bruton now, because it's Marcus that's running the show with SMI, and we still don't know what's going to happen with if they privatize that company and then NASCAR buys everything, mm-hmm. which is kind of what their plan has been.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
What's available? I mean, you got people clamoring up in the Midwest or the northern Midwest that why if we're going to sell Chicagoland, which doesn't sound like it's actually going to happen, that's just was news that happened, that we should go to Iowa. And I'm like, that track is actually not that fun. Mm. Like when you watch those Saturday night Xfinity races, you're like, And I don't know if it's because it's an Xfinity race and it's on a Saturday night and everybody's out, having fun with the friends and going out to dinner and partying and whatnot and not really watching. And I just don't see that as that's not the target. If you're going to remove Chicagoland from the NASCAR footprint, then you ought to go to Milwaukee or Road America.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, both those tracks are within 2 hours of Chicago, essentially, which means it's basically the same market. I mean, hell, how far away is Atlanta Motor Speedway from downtown Atlanta? It's like 58 miles.
Right.
Like it's, downtown Atlanta doesn't even have an FM station that plays the race anymore.
Right.
Right. You can barely pick up 640 AM if you're not inside the perimeter, and nobody inside the perimeter is listening to NASCAR anyway, because that's the way the demographics changed in Atlanta. Now, there's probably FM stations up near Dawsonville that have a really small reach that might be playing those races on FM. But, I mean, if it was me and I'm like, where do we want to go? I'm like, Road America first, Milwaukee mile second.
I wonder if Iowa is like a gateway drug to that, like test the waters over there. Since we already have the touring series going there, it feels like a natural, hey, let's go to Iowa for Cup, and then later on, we can expand out. I think more than baseball that we just talked about for a while, I think NASCAR has such an opportunity here to try out different stuff and get that feedback on what works and what doesn't and the rest of it, which kind of leads us into second period here, where they announced that Chicago, Richmond, and Sonoma have been dropped from the schedule. And, Sonoma we kind of saw coming, but, that's a bummer. Chicago, up in the Midwest and Illinois, being this is not a complaint, but being a little, slower roll on the opening of everything. Richmond that kind of surprised me. Why not Richmond? You know what I mean?
Well, I think the reason why is that they were probably looking at how many races can they schedule over what period of time.
Sure.
And the fact that Virginia has not opened up the state to that kind of activity. And they're like, well, we still have 2 Martinsville races to figure out, and those tend to drive more television than Richmond does, I would imagine. That's a guess. I don't know for sure because I'm not privy to those numbers. But I was surprised that Richmond was one of the races that is going to ultimately miss out, because I would have assumed that Kansas would have been in the Richmond place of the release to say, these are the races that are not going to be run.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how state-driven it is, right? Like, well, Virginia's not open, so we can't run there. But so we'll run 2 in South Carolina, 4 in South Carolina.
It's ultimately going to be 3, right? Because we're going to run 2 next week in the next 9 days. And then we're going to go right back there for Labor Day weekend and run the original Darlington race, the Southern 500. So you're like, okay, there's 2 races right there that have to come off the ISC/NASCAR slate. So, I mean, you had to see 2 ISC races disappear, and that's what we saw with Chicagoland and Richmond. I just was surprised it wasn't Kansas, I guess is all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you mentioned it before, but Chicagoland Speedway, is it possible, Sherwin, that we've seen the last race there? There's a leak on Twitter via Adam Stern, some plans to create like a housing subdivision where the track is, and they were supposed to talk about it in April in some public hearing thing or whatever, and now they've moved it back to, I wrote the date, July 16th, because that's my birthday, but they're going to talk about it on July 16th now. Do you think this has legs?
Based on the last thing I read before we started the podcast, I would say no. It sounds like they have plans to sell the land around the track, but the track itself is not for sale. So I don't know what that means. We know that Richmond is in a high density area in an urban area.
Right.
So, I mean, if you filled all the campgrounds around Chicagoland with houses, would all of a sudden the noise ordinance change? Because it's been a night race. Most of the time that they've had a race, it's been a night race.
Right.
Now we know that it's going to race better during the day, and I think it's been a day race the last 2 years, I believe. So which worked out good because it's a worn out track. So
I don't know. The information I had leading up,
it's probably good for now.
Yeah. The information I had leading up was like 3 hours prior to the show starting, so things seem to be changing on a regular basis. Right after they release that, obviously there's going to be some reactions and everything else going on. We had the return of racing in a way, or in a couple ways. World of Outlaws in Iowa, Larson finished 10th. So he's, back racing and doing his thing. PTM sponsor Kathleen McDonald, she returned to racing there in Missouri, and they had a
I-55.
Yeah, the I-55 race. And she said, checking temperatures as you come in and all this other stuff, and distancing in the stands and everything. And that was really interesting. We hope everybody's staying healthy and safe. But there's some return of racing going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is the start of it. I mean, you and I talked offline about what our responsibilities should or shouldn't be, but this is starting. Other professional sports are going to take this in. They're going to watch what happens.
Oh yeah,
and they're going to try to understand mostly what the TV numbers are. And the thing that NASCAR fans, probably the ones that listen to us, probably already understand this because of how often we talk about it. But while the gate is important, ticket sales and concessions are very important, and selling campsites is extremely important because those are highly valuable, especially at places like Talladega. That's not the bulk of the money that the track receives. The bulk of the money that they receive is from television. So the better the TV numbers are, the more valuable the commercials become, which Rusty knows better than anybody because I haven't worked in one side of that industry in the past. So I think we're going to kill it on numbers because we're going to basically be the first. UFC technically, and the WWE, WWE basically didn't even stop, and the UFC kind of did neither. Mm-hmm. And they're also dependent upon that same process, even though a lot of what both of those entities do is pay-per-view, which NASCAR really has never done for a major touring series. But the TV money is what's going to matter the most, and that's what's going to keep those tracks running.
Yeah, and a good point you bring up there. However, I would say that the amount of money they're getting from TV for this race, or for the races right now, those are already set in stone and written in contracts and blah, blah, blah. So it's not like if they sell more advertisements that it's going to be more money for the track at this point. But it is a good time for the track to kind of showcase what they can do and what's out there. So as we were talking at the top of the show, the TV event that goes with this is super important for these tracks. So they can show off, hey, you need to come here, you need to watch us, or you need to, somehow engage with what's going on here. It's a lot of pressure on them, and hopefully, some of these tracks come through and are able to convince more folks to come and watch a race.
Yeah, well, I think David made some great points earlier just talking about Major League Baseball in the whole developing the television product into something that is more useful for someone who's on their couch and it doesn't even have an option to go sit in the grandstands and experience all the things that fans get to experience. So they're going to have to learn, and I thought NASCAR has probably done this better than any other sport of creating that entertainment value to the broadcast. I think they learned a lot during the virtual racing process. I think we're going to hear a lot more driver communication or team communication as we go through this process so people can understand what these teams are going through, particularly when we start the season out. Darlington's not even going to have qualifying. And I know you're going to get to this later, so I will stop short. But because I know we have a line item in the notes, but there's going to be a lot less TV product to consume. So the TV product that you are able to consume needs to be as good and as entertaining as possible.
Yeah. I'll move right into it, dude. NASCAR is racing. We're going racing, and every eyeball in sports and beyond is looking at NASCAR right now. Starting in Darlington, we got 3 races starting Sunday. We'll do a podcast in between the first race, the first Cup race, and the next Cup race. So luckily, we don't have to pick once right here. But there's a few interesting pieces of this. One is media restrictions. Sherwin, you had texted me earlier. I think they were allowing, you said, like 3 media people. Is that right?
They're allowing 4. Jenna Fryer is grandfathered in because she writes for AP, and AP is a copy material entity for like a ton of different places. Like there are like every new much like we can subscribe to an internet television channel, people can subscribe to the Associated Press in order to post the information that they make available. So that's going to be Jenna Fryer. NASCAR is going to pick 2, actually not NASCAR, the National Motorsports Journalism, whatever that group is, in whatever it is, doesn't matter. They're going to pick 2, and then NASCAR itself is going to pick a local journalist.
Okay.
And those 4 people are going to be allowed to be the media people. They've already said they're only allowing 1 pit row reporter. That's going to be Regan Smith at Darlington. Good for him. Love Regan. Does a great job. But yeah, we're going to be relying on a really small group of people. And the only thing that concerns me about that going forward is everything that we've talked about the economy offline or online is that, companies are starting to realize they either don't need this many people or they don't need as much brick and mortar as they have. and things are going to change.
So I almost feel like we need to do some picks for media. Like if you're the national NASCAR media group you're talking about, who are you picking, Sherwin?
Yeah, I guess it's NMSP, NASCAR Motorsports, whatever it is.
Press, something like that. Yeah.
Well, if I want to read the best stuff there is to read, and I already know that Jeff Cluck's not going to get to go because the Athletic has them on a travel ban, and I know that Pockris is in Charlotte. I want Bob Pockris there for sure.
Yep. I mean that's almost a given. If you don't, if you get to pick and you don't pick Bob, what are you doing? You know, like he's going to work harder than anybody else out there too.
And he knows so much shit that the crew chiefs ask him the rules.
Right. Like, he's a resource on both sides.
Like that's reality. I would say, I don't know. I would love it for Kelly Crandall to get her shot at it. And I would like to see, Nate Ryan doesn't do a whole lot of on-site reporting right now, so I would suspect he would stay in the background anyway. Who would be another person? I don't know. I'd say, Adam Stern is moving his way up into the upper echelon of guys that get it right. And, maybe he's a guy that should be there.
Yeah.
In terms of local reporters, I don't know anybody that's local to Darlington.
Sure. Yeah. No, it was just more the other two. But
yeah.
So, Sherwin, it is time, as we're just over the 1 hour mark on the show. Let's go ahead and do some picks for Darlington first race. So last week we both picked Dale Jr. because obviously, and Dale finished 15th. So before that, let me see. You picked, before that, I picked Harvick and you picked Chase. Chase didn't run the race, and Harvick finished 18th. So why don't we have you take that first pick?
Okay. Well, since we're not going to run practice, and I don't know if they've even decided yet whether they're going to draw pills or actually run a qualifying lap without any practice, I'm going to go with NASCAR's wheelman, Kurt Busch.
Kurt Busch. There it is. I'm feeling Hendrick right now. And I don't know why exactly, but and I'll probably look like a total dope, but I'm going to go with Bowman.
I don't think that's a bad pick at all. I had thought all day about picking Chase, and everybody that listens to this podcast will be like, "Oh, you're picking Chase because you're a Chase fan and you're from Georgia." And I was like, "All right, let me get a little deeper into this. Get into the back of the brain a little bit and make a different kind of choice." Right on.
Well, Sherwin, why don't you close us out? Tell the folks where they can find you, and I've got a whole read to do too, still for the sponsors. So I'll get to that in a moment. But tell us what's going on.
Well, hell, I thought a mini monologue that I was preparing for, but we talked so long with David, I don't have any more. So you can find me at Pregame Engineer on Twitter and at Andrew L. Sherwin on Instagram. And we'll be right back at you next week. We're actually going to go on Thursday after the second Darlington race with Matt Weaver.
Booyah.
And then we got some pretty cool things lined up after that. I believe Rick Houston might be in the fold. Word is David Smith from Motorsports Analytics might be in there. Maybe even some Rick Ware.
Wait, so if we're going...
nice little list lined up for you.
If we're waiting until Thursday, we got to make the second pick too then, don't we? Because there's a Wednesday race.
We do.
Okay.
We do.
All right. So Kurt Busch for you, Bowman for me in the first race. For the second race, give us a pick.
Chase.
My man.
I couldn't help it.
I was just sitting here thinking I got to pick somebody. I'm picking Kyle Busch.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. He's the number one favorite in Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah, right on. And his hometown, too. Why wouldn't he be? Well, ladies and gentlemen,
he's the worst bet in Vegas because it's 6. I think he's 5-1, 5 or 6-1.
Yeah. You don't make no money.
Yeah, you put your $20 down, you're gonna get $110, and you're gonna go waste all that on 3 beers at the Bellagio.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen,
distancing from everybody at the bar.
We're going to close this thing out. I've got a little read to do, Sherwin, so I'll be back with you in a bit. Here goes nothing. Woo! You know what the deal is. Follow us at PETM Podcast, PETMPodcast.com. He's Andrew Sherwin at Pregame Engineer. I'm Tailgate Mayor Rusty Wallace at Tailgate Mayor. And as always, this podcast is sponsored by you. That's right. You go to patreon.com/PETM. Join that What You Drink Club for as little as $1 a month and get that free koozie and some stickers. The best part is, every cent this year, once we get out of this quarantine, we're going to go ahead and donate to sponsoring drivers. Join the PETM Posse today. Be a part of the sport you love. This week's show was brought to you by our official sponsors at that $5 and up per month level. Here we go. Aaron Bearden, Robert Keplinger, Colby McClam, Eric Kepner, Ryan Kiefer, Patrick Cleary, Jeff Brown, Brandon Crowd, Kathleen McDonald, Stacey Wright, Brandon Carl, Rika Porter, John Bob Les Miller, Julie Boston, John Pearson, Eddie Greer III, Younker Motorsports, David Mullins, Patrick Johnson, Brett Morris, Crystal Smoke, Fred Rosado, Chad Knapp, Stacey Coleman, Lisa Chinana, Rick Houston, Sarah Anbari, Evan Roller, and Brad Harrison. Thank y'all for joining along. Thank y'all for being sponsors, and we will talk to y'all next week. And cut. There we go. If you're on the YouTube, thank you for hanging out with us. Hope you enjoyed a little bit of baseball talk. What else do we have to talk about right now? But yeah, it's been awesome.
That was fun. David gave us a whole lot of time.
Yeah, he did. Y'all, here's the thing. Like I said it at the top of the show, 243 episodes in, and this is the first one where, like, I've just had a total Skype meltdown. Hence why I have Sherwin's picture up and just my videos. So what a mess.
Well, I'm not even up anymore, so that's. I was up there for a minute with my Rico hat on, which is fun.
Oh, are you not? Oh no, you should still be on there. I think I thought I had the picture up.
Oh, you would. If you press stop, then my YouTube stopped too.
Oh, that might have happened. So who knows?
Yeah.
Technical difficulties abound, but that was fun. It's something that I know I said toward the end. I'm like, we should start a baseball podcast, but really, it was just fun to talk about something, just something a little bit different.
Well, and that's why I thought it would be fun. And I've been following Dave O'Brien for, the better part of a decade. I've read his stuff when he was with AJC, and then obviously I still pay attention. Now that he's got a podcast, that makes it easier on me because I can listen and don't have to read. But he was great. He obviously knows his stuff. I feel like he probably appreciated that we had at least some mild amount of perspective about the Braves that we could talk to him with, that was beyond just, hey, do you report on the Braves? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't have asked him if I didn't think that we could have come up with some interesting conversations. And I mean, we got all into all over the place with baseball. That Tony Gwynn stuff was fantastic.
Dude,
I'm so glad that you dug that up because that was so cool.
I was absolutely amazed. Here's what it started with. I saw on Facebook somebody posted one of those stats. I don't remember which one, but they posted one of the stats, and I go, well, that can't be true, and so I looked it up, and then it's listed among different stats, and it's in various resources, so maybe it's copy-pasted around the internet, but it seems to be true as far as I can tell, all the stuff that I spouted off. But I was just like, I can't believe how in the 90s and stuff, when I was probably biggest into baseball at that time. I'm kind of a pedestrian fan at this point. We went to all these games and stuff, and to think that I didn't recognize at the time what we were seeing with Tony Gwynn was just, and looking back at his career, it's just the stats are staggering. So that was incredible to me to just read the stats. I just love. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about just reading those stats. I was just floored.
Well, I mean, just and this is no pat. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but just the memory of the things that I've read that came back to me that I've read about Tony Gwynn and the things I've read about Chipper Jones. Like I'm pretty sure Tony Gwynn's career batting average was .336, and if it's not that, it's pretty freaking close. I mean, I knew that he had batted .336. I knew about the strikeouts thing. I mean, I knew the 17 homers thing. Like, I mean, those are things that are ingrained in me as a baseball fan. But to your point, I didn't really, because the Padres sucked so much ass in the 90s. I didn't, we just never got to realize how good he was.
Yeah, yeah.
And not only that, but he won like 4 Gold Gloves in right field.
To be that much of a master of the sport it's incredible to me. To have, especially somebody, I mentioned, I've said I've been a baseball umpire before. I sucked bad at baseball. Like I was terrible. I went to basketball early on in middle school and just said, I'm just going to do this from now on. Cause there's something about a ball being thrown at me that I just can't hit, or I can't comprehend in my own head, or whatever it is. This just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about this 100 times before, sitting on the couch having a cold drink, and that's a sport that I'm pretty sure my hand-eye coordination and my body shape and size would have been best suited for. And I never played it because we just, Dad didn't like the politics of baseball in our hometown, so we didn't play baseball.
That was another thing.
Let me,
the politics in baseball were way bigger in my area too. So me and you both kind of in the suburbs of Atlanta. The politics were insane, and us trying to navigate that just so I could play ball, which I didn't really enjoy anyway, because I sucked. It's like, why are we doing this?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know what age you would have had to start in order for it to matter. For politics to stop being a part of the process. I mean, my parents shelled out a shitload of money for me to play soccer, but I was better than. There was only 10 kids better than me.
Yeah,
in my age group. So it's like, that made it easy. Like, you didn't have to. There was no, who you voting for bullshit. It was, oh, you're good. You get to play. This is what it costs. And, I don't know what baseball was like. I can't even imagine. They had that carryover rule where, if you had like an 11-man roster, you could carry like 6 or 7 kids over the next year that would never even go in the draft. Basketball wasn't like that. You had to start over every year.
Yeah. I don't know all the ins and outs, or didn't know
I don't know what it was like in Gwinnett County, but in Fayette County, in basketball, if you were a coach and you had a son in the league or a daughter, depending on which you was coaching, you were supposed to take your son in the second round.
Yeah.
And if you didn't do that, he was available. So we actually had that situation happen, not with me and my dad, but that happened with another guy who was an asshole. Thought he could get away with not drafting his kid in the second round, and his kid got drafted. So he coached a team that didn't even have his son on it.
Wow.
Because the county basketball league was like, fuck you, dude. These are the rules.
Yeah.
But you know what? I mean, if you were like if you were my dad in 7th, 9th, and 10th grade, had a guy that, that was your son that was going to go in the top 3 in the first round if he wasn't coaching, like you won the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
Because you got 2 first-round picks
mm-hmm.
in a league that was only about 25 players deep.
So Roger said baseball parents are the worst. So Roger, funny story, when I was umpiring, we could do middle school, high school, all day long, no problem. You get a ration of crap no matter what. And so you just, you always just let that run off. Who cares? But for some reason, the T-ball league was the one where the parents were the most toxic. And it was hilarious because my umpires
well, that's
group,
because they don't know their kids suck yet.
Right. And my umpires group refused to do T-ball games. So I was doing T-ball games at that point, because I had not really graduated up yet, because I was only like 16, 17 years old. I was doing T-ball games for like $40 a game, and they only lasted an hour. And I got paid in an envelope with cash. The IRS never saw any of that. I think I'm beyond the statute of limitations, hopefully, at this point. But, as a 16-year-old making $40 an hour, are you kidding me? And so, yeah, I was all about it. And, boy, they just tore India. It was nuts. They were, you were ruining their child's life by calling that strike. Well, it's T-ball, so there's not really strikes, but calling that out where he was out by, 3 steps. Oh, come on, what the, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you got to give him a chance. Dude, he was out by, everybody knows he's out. What are you talking about?
It's funny you mentioned that, and I know that we've talked about it, but people are getting to see this on the YouTube, so it's worth talking about again, just because of personal experience and the fact that it's interesting to begin with. But the absolute worst parents I ever dealt with were 13-year-old girls club ball.
Mm-hmm.
Like the U13, and it was something about that age. At U17, I did run into some shit. That's the only time I ever thrown a coach out of a game. Which I think I told you about this before. My booker was the assistant coach, and he was sitting on the sidelines when I tossed the coach.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't say a word.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, that's what I would have done. He was acting like a jackass.
Right.
And it's girls that are, at that time I was probably 24, 25 maybe. No, probably 23. Those numbers don't really matter. But you're refereeing girls that are 7 or 8 years younger than you. You're almost done with college, or you are done with college, and they're just playing ball, and
mm-hmm.
And I'm calling fouls, and they're hollering. You get hollering from the fans are the shittiest people ever of their kids.
Right.
Like that's just reality, and you just learn to deal with that, or you don't stay being a referee very long, or an umpire, or whatever.
Right.
But like you get a 17-year-old girl turn around and like give you the business,
mm-hmm.
as Don Cherry would say, 15-yard penalty,
business.
giving him the business.
Oh
yeah. And I'm like, nah, like I just ripped the card out right away, bang.
Right.
And and this coach is just giving you all the hell that. Why are you calling so many fouls on us? And I'm like, because your team fouls more. Like it'd be like you getting shit from a coach. Like, why are you calling so many strikes on us? Like their pitcher throws more strikes. Like
right.
I don't know what you want from me. Like this isn't a bell curve. There is a strike zone.
Right.
If you don't throw it in there, it's not a strike.
Right.
Like if you kick somebody away from the ball, that is a foul. It's not we got to make sure it all evens out. I'm like, this isn't rec. You paid money to be here. You're paying me $55 to be here with a whistle.
Yeah, yeah. Crazy, man. Crazy. Let's see. I'm just updating the rest of this stuff. Yeah, I know I've talked with you before. The only time I ever threw a coach out of a game, and there were plenty that deserved it, but I was young. I didn't want to be, the hothead or whatever. But he kept arguing with me over a rule at the end of the game that he was just totally wrong about, and he was obstructing the ability for us to even move forward. I'm like, Coach, just go sit down. Go complain to my boss later then, and say that you were cheated out of something. But I got to have you move right now. That's the main thing. You have to leave this conversation. Go sit down on the bench. And he just wouldn't leave. And I'm finally like, all right. I didn't even know how to toss somebody at that point. I'm like, you're out of here. Like, hopefully that worked. And apparently it did. And, it was one of those things where, if you got tossed.
Yeah, baseball needs a card system.
Yeah.
So everybody knows, like, where they stand.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
and if you
you said fuck you, that's a yellow card. You call me a cocksucker, that's a red card.
and in the in that time, this is probably similar for you for y'all. Like if you got tossed, you weren't just tossed for that game. You were tossed for the next game, and then had to go like through some training or something stupid. Like it was a real deal.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, we had to write it up.
Yeah, I
especially
had to go
when
through
I was in
paperwork.
high school, because in high school you could card coaches, which is high school was so weirdly different than club ball. Like there was a ton of rules that were different, and so I had to know two completely different sets of rules.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really had a problem with a coach. I only ever had a problem with like fans. When I was doing club ball. Because, dads be getting upset about stuff.
Right.
and you walk off the field and, like, there's nowhere for you to go. Like, on the other side of the field is a cow pasture. It's like, all right, I got one place I can go, the concession stand, which is where my envelope with cash is.
Right, right.
Which means I have to walk by the parent who's pissed.
Right, right.
And that's just, and the guy eventually is going to he's 48, 50 years old. I'm 23.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you want to wander over there to where the gravel starts,
yeah,
I can let you know how wrong what you're saying is. But if not, that's probably better for you.
I remember I had a basketball game. So I played. I liked playing basketball better, and I liked reffing basketball better because I felt like I knew the game a lot better. Like I'm not saying I was a bad baseball ref, but I always felt like strike, I think, or he's out. I'm pretty sure. In basketball, I felt like I never made a bad call. In baseball, I don't know, but in basketball, there was this one coach one time that said, I'm going to wait for you outside. And this is my first game of the day. It was like an 8 a.m. game. And I said, all right, buddy, I'll be there in about 12 hours. I've got 13 games today. So, if you want to hang out, I'll be there. It's just de-escalating.
That's kind of what I told the guy. I was like, well, I got 2 more games. So if you're planning on sticking around for 3 more hours,
yeah,
we can have this. We can have this conversation like adults.
Yeah.
But I wasn't a teenager like you were. I mean, I was a goddamn, been in fights in the fraternity adult.
Yeah.
I was in shape. I just ran up and down the field all day long. This was a fat slob that was mad because I didn't add any time during a tournament when we were specifically told not to add time because of how long it might delay the overall process of finishing a tournament.
Dude.
Because if it's supposed to be a 90-minute game, buddy, that next game is kicking off at 100 minutes.
Dude, the guy that I threw out
10 minutes
that I talked about, the guy that I threw out was because that same thing. It had to do with a time limit thing, and he didn't understand the rules on it, and I had to toss him because of that. It was the exact same thing. That's funny. Let's close this thing down from the YouTube side. Thank y'all for joining. You hear a little bit about our past lives and what we've been up to before. But been a blast having y'all on.
You know
Thank
what?
you.
Hopefully we gave them a little bit of after dark to make up for the fact that we started so late.
I know. I'll blame myself, but I have no idea what the problem is. Like, I'm not going to change anything next week. Hopefully it just works. But
no,
like,
it
I don't know
just shit happens, man.
Yeah. We'll talk to y'all later. Thank you. See ya.